Great. Thanks very much for the introduction, Chris. So just to recap, my name is Clint Conlon. I am a modern desktop technology solutions professional, which is rather a mouthful. That's quite common at Microsoft. So I generally just refer to myself as a Microsoft 365 specialist. It's a bit easier to remember for me anyway. So today I've only got kind of 10 slides that I'd like to take you through. There was a number of questions that were put across via Christopher. Most of those seem to revolve around the collaboration and document aspects of the products. So hopefully a kind of 15-20 minute demo on that can summarize it much nicer than 100 slides. And at the end, as Christopher mentioned, we can then have some time for Q&A as well. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to speak about some of the trends in the non-profit workplace. Now, I'm aware that I've had the briefing that the way that Age UK works is that the 150 or so brand partners work completely separately from a legal standpoint and in most cases from an IT perspective as well. There is some similarities in terms of the way that you guys are working. We know and are aware that most of you, from the questions I've seen and from the discussions I've had with those based at Age UK, central or national, that this is certainly something that we want to strategically start to think a bit more about as to how can we better collaborate amongst the brands, and that's the reason, I guess, for the likes of these seminars as well. So some of the trends that I've seen is that you may or may not be aware that by 2020, millennials will account for over 50% of workers in the workplace. So because of that, what we're finding is that employees in general are having much more demands and expectations set on IT departments. So they generally want to be able to work from anywhere at any time and ideally from any device. The one part that often is not front of mind for the employees is security. So as an organization, we need to think about how can we enable this to really empower our employees, but also make sure we do it in a secure manner as well. One of the points I'm going to touch on, there was a few licensing questions. I didn't want to deep dive and turn this into just a licensing Q&A because it can happen very quickly. But I just want to clear something up because pretty much any customer I speak to, this question does come up, is what is the difference between Microsoft 365 and Office 365? So for those that aren't aware, Microsoft 365, again, the marketing spiel is it's a complete intelligent solution to empower employees to be creative and work together securely. When you're looking at it from fundamentals, what it is it contains Office 365. It contains an element of Windows 10 Enterprise, and it contains enterprise mobility and security. These are the three kind of large product SKUs that make up Microsoft 365 as a whole.
Hi, Clint. I don't know if you're showing your screen, but we can't see anything.
Oh, right. Let me try and fix that.
And just to say to anybody else, don't share your screen. Just you should just be watching. You shouldn't be sharing your screen. Yeah, there we go. We can see it. That's great. Thank you.
You only miss one slide. So
okay.
Yeah. So today, as I mentioned, we are really just going to focus on Office 365. In further workshops, by all means, we can start to look at certainly enterprise mobility and security for how to manage our devices and data and maintain compliance for things like GDPR. I will also, as part of the closeout, I'll share some links that you can keep handy for when you're trying to compare licensing SKUs when these discussions do come up as well. So as mentioned, let's focus on Office 365. Now, from speaking to Christopher, when he made me aware that we do have so many different brands, full transparency here is that we can actually see how many tenancies have the term Age UK attached to them. So I managed to find 25. So the idea is that we can't deep dive into the data that's on there, but what I can do is I can see the monthly usage of certain products. So without drilling down into document levels or usernames or anything like that, it's a really good way for me to get an understanding of where you're at. And it lined up quite closely with the questions that were being asked and the kind of background information that Christopher and the team gave me, and that in general, Age UK as a whole are really only making use of the email aspect of the Office 365 licenses. So looking at the broader scope, we're probably aware that for authoring, we do have Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote. We have for mail Outlook, and for the social aspect is Yammer. So where we would use Yammer typically is it's very much a cross or wide organizational chat platform. It is, I guess there's no better way to describe it than it is. It's Facebook for businesses. So this is where for other non-profits I've seen really good use cases is with one organisation, they had a lot of social care aspects where they had different regions. So what they were doing is they were able to share their success stories with the rest of the organisation through Yammer. The great thing about Yammer is it also has chat functionality built in so that other people can then start to engage, you know, the typical things you expect of social media, like likes, ask questions, do polls, etc. So that's part of the Yammer side. When we look at content and intranet, this is where most of the questions lay from yourselves, as we have OneDrive and we have SharePoint. Now, OneDrive, you may be aware that there is a personal version of OneDrive as well that you can have, but the version that comes with our Office 365 licenses. So we have two donation options currently for our licensing stack. So we have the Office 365 Business Essentials, and we have Office 365 E1 licenses. So like I said, I won't delve too deep into those just now, but be aware that they actually contain access to everything you can see on screen as well. So for OneDrive, for example, with these licenses, even the donated ones from Microsoft, each user will receive 1 terabyte of space that they can utilize. So each user gets that to themselves. The way we think about OneDrive is it is for personal storage. So a good use case would be that just now one of the risks potentially that you or other organizations may have is that if users store documents on their desktops or in their documents folder locally and don't have those backed up or synchronized anywhere else, then if the device fails, you know, there's a good chance you're going to have some data lost there. I know that quite often organizations, we say, well, we have a file share and we have map network drives, and we expect users to copy the files that are important to us to the network drives. I know from my own experience, I used to be a premier field engineer with Microsoft. I've done a lot of hands-on in my time. If you allow them to save to their desktop and documents, there will be important files there. It's just part and parcel. So OneDrive, a good option there is we can actually synchronize the files that are on the user's desktop and documents to OneDrive so that not only can they pick them up from anywhere they go, which is obviously great, including their mobile phone or other devices or the web if you allow them to, but in the event of the device completely failing, they could then start with the new device that's provided by IT, or indeed the same device that's been rebuilt, and pick up where they left off. As well as that, something else that OneDrive helps with is it is technically a protection against ransomware, because the way that ransomware works is it encrypts your files and then tries to charge you to get the key to unlock those files again. So because OneDrive stores the files in the cloud, there will be copies of those files that will remain unencrypted. So that way you can actually restore directly from those files in the event of ransomware attacks. Very useful. SharePoint and SharePoint Online, it almost splits in two, in that SharePoint can be used almost as that in the cloud file repository. So quite often we have organizations who want to take those file shares and map drives they have locally and move them into SharePoint Online. So into the likes of Teams sites or via Teams as well, which we'll come to. That's a great use case. And on the other side is it can serve as an intranet as well. So if we have old legacy HTML websites that you need a degree in development to update, that's not ideal. We want to be able to allow our users, and certainly some of our users at least, the ability to update these. Then SharePoint communication sites are one option for that. Moving along to chat, calls and meetings, we have Microsoft Teams and Skype for Business. So a question I often get here is Microsoft Teams just Skype for Business with a different kind of branding on it? Or
then you'd know about it.
Cool. Yeah, so is Skype for Business just, sorry, is Teams just a rebadged Skype for Business? The answer to that is no. Teams itself was rebuilt from the ground up. So what you may find if you already have Skype for Business, what I would ask you to do is try a side-by-side comparison of Teams video conferencing versus Skype for Business video conferencing. You should, hopefully, like most people have asked to do that kind of test, is you notice that Microsoft Teams is just a lot smoother. It's a lot better. There's a number of reasons for that. One of the biggest ones is that it runs over the same ports as typical web traffic, which is port 80 and 443 for the techies on the call. So certainly we have built this from the ground up. There is no immediate plans to get rid of Skype for Business, so you don't need to worry about that. And there are really good resources for how to transition between the two as well. So Skype for Business is great for video calling. It's still great for chat. Microsoft Teams takes that functionality, but then adds additional capabilities that I'll show you as part of our demo. Analytics, we're thinking about things like Power BI, which is where we can do a number of different reporting options there. I'm not going to delve too deep here just now. Workplace Analytics and My Analytics, they both combine to help with things like work-life balance. So it can actually tell your user or staff how many hours they spent out of normal working hours checking email or looking at documents or taking meetings. Me personally, I find it's definitely helped my work-life balance in that I've managed to stop checking my emails quite as often, and it gives a lot of nice tips there as well. So again, happy to speak about that in more depth, maybe in a future workshop. The last option there, again, I'll kind of speed through, is advanced security and compliance. So advanced threat protection, security management, information protection, compliance, threat intelligence. So we do now have the ability, using our Microsoft stack, to do things like automatically classify documents based on their content. So if you have, a good example is Age UK, you may have certain reference numbers, sequences that you have when speaking about potential care patients. You could automatically classify those documents when it sees that pattern in a file, and you can then set the document to auto encrypt to stop it being forwarded outside the organization. And with that, it then allows you to do things like revoke access to the document as well. So you could share a confidential document externally, maybe with the NHS, but you could then revoke that access if and when deemed no longer appropriate. So again, probably another topic for another day. You can imagine speaking security would need more than 5 minutes, absolutely. Nearly there with the slides. A question I often get is, right, you've named about 5 products there that we can kind of use to collaborate with each other. Where do they fit together? So this is usually quite a nice slide, where to start the conversation. So we think of Microsoft Teams as our inner loop tool. So this is the people that you work regularly with on core projects. So quite often we will have in an organisation a team per department. I was going to say a team per team. Try to use that term as less as possible. But a team per department is often how most organisations would start. But then quite often, especially things like sales, marketing, product development, if you had any aspect of that, you find that certain people do tend to work together more. So in those situations, you can create additional teams as well to cater for those people. Before I jump into the demo as well, I'd like to just call out what Teams is. Again, maybe going a wee bit technical here, so apologies for those it doesn't touch. But when you create a new team, it actually creates a number of things in the background as well. So the first thing is it creates an Office 365 group. So this is where when you add users to that group, that's what determines who will then get access to the additional resources that are created, which are namely a SharePoint team site. So that's for the file repository when files are dropped into that team. The chat functionality is actually based on Exchange Online. So it creates a group that the group is then allowed access to that chat functionality when it's shared. Okay. Yes.
Sorry, Danny. Is there any way of stopping a group from being created, or does it have to be created? Is it?
What's the use case? So what you can do, you can reverse it. So if you already had a group, you can create a team from a group. So you do need a Office 365 group to create a team, but you can have multiple teams linked to one group. Don't know if that answers your question. If not, elaborate more and I can help you.
Yeah, maybe another question. I suppose I was wondering, does a group have to be created? I know it's created in the background, but
yeah,
is there any way of suppressing that, or does a group have to be created as part of setting up a new team, for example?
You need to have it because you need something that handles the identity and permissions aspect. So if you didn't do that, then Microsoft or Office 365 wouldn't know who should have access to those resources. So that's why you can absolutely create a new team from an existing group. So you might have the IT team are part of 3 teams within the same group, fine. But you still need that identity piece to that's like the glue, if you like. And the idea behind it is it's the old school method would have been that you would need to create additional security groups for each of the resources, then assign those. So Office 365 groups trying to take the kind of overhead off of that. But understand you maybe wouldn't always want a new Office 365 group for each one. Another question I sometimes get then is, can we stop teams being created to stop people just having hundreds of them? Absolutely. So IT have the control to set approval processes or just complete deny. I don't like the complete deny option, but at the start, in the beginning, you at least need the approval process to avoid something we refer to as team sprawl. That's where people just go a wee bit crazy when they get the tool and start creating a number of teams. But there are options and ways and means. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I suppose we were just mainly concerned about, so if we've already got a shared email address, say, I don't know, digital and technology at aguk.org.uk, then if another group is created, then that also gets given the same email address. So is there any conflicts there? That may be a more technical question for another time, but that's what I'm wondering.
In short, you can actually set naming conventions as well. So if you're trying to avoid something, you can certainly say that the team needs to be called this, and the associated email address needs to have this kind of setup. So there is ways and means to make sure it avoids. If to your original point, if there was already an email address with that, it wouldn't be able to set that. It would set something else with an appended series of numbers or letters.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no worries. So going round our circle, so inner loop teams is absolutely where we're going. If you have Skype for Business, still a good option. The idea is that over the coming years, we're trying to entice customers across the teams. Yammer is the outer loop. So I mentioned that this is more cross-organizational. So people you connect with openly across the organization. So in Microsoft, for example, we host leadership connections. So this is where there's a video stream of a kind of live Q&A with Satya Nadella and the senior leadership team every month. I know that other organisations, non-profits included, are really interested just now in how can we, as a business, engage with those, especially those out in the field. You know, how can we make sure that they feel part of the organisation, that they have the chance to ask questions and get engaged. So that's a really good use case for where Yammer and Stream, our video service, comes together. Again, Stream is part of the licensing stack that you already have donated, and of course if you buy anything over and above that as well. Okay, and lastly, email. So it looks like in the most part most of you have adopted Outlook and Exchange Online. For those that haven't, of course, there are ways and means to take advantage of that. So we can, via Central, hopefully we can get you in touch with the right partners at the right times. Okay, so I'm just going to fire over to my demo tenant just to give you a quick look at a couple of things we've spoke about. Bear with me. Okay, normally there's a few slides to set this up, so if you wonder why I've kind of drawn a fake beard on myself, the joke is that with a name like Clint Conlon and a Glaswegian accent, not very many people actually believe that's your name, even if you email them. So quite often I get emails referring to me as Colin, Clinton, or something in between. And at one point I had Colin and Clinton. So the guys in my team are taking the mickey out of me. So I thought that I should at least make my demo tenant user called Colin Clinton. There you go. Okay. So we've logged in. As you can see, Colin is running Windows 10 Enterprise just now. He has the full Office 365 Pro Plus, so that's the desktop apps installed. So he is licensed, as you would expect, for Office 365 E5. Okay, so I'm going to give you a wee quick tour of Teams. So some of you may have went and downloaded the Teams application just to join this meeting, which is great. That gives you the full functionality. The other option you do have, and I'll just show you that we have one of Colin's colleagues, Megan, logged in via the Teams web app as well, and it does a pretty good job. You know, as web apps go, the gap's probably closing, but for the video conferencing side, I always prefer the desktop app. Absolutely. Okay, we'll come back to Megan in a second. So I'm going to just run through the left-hand side first. So on the left-hand side, we have activity. So that's where if someone mentions you by name or requests that you respond to something by using something called an app mention. So anyone that uses Twitter or Facebook should be fairly familiar with those. Then it will flag up in the activity. So that's almost where you're notified to things you need to either respond to or someone wants to make you aware of. Okay. Next option down is chat. So this is where we can chat with any of our colleagues, or indeed, if allowed, external users as well. So in the background, I've been kind of speaking with Age UK National about collaboration amongst the brand partners, and something we could potentially see in the future is the ability to not only chat using Teams across brands partners, but also see their status as well. So I should probably explain the status first. If you look in the top right hand corner, you can see Colin there. The green tick means he is currently available. So this syncs with your Outlook calendar. So if you had meetings in at any point in time, when it gets to that time, your status will change to busy as per your Outlook calendar. If you wanted to manually override that, absolutely. Sometimes if you're prepping, so for example, for this call, I made sure that I set myself to do not disturb because I didn't want any chat messages being pinged over to me whilst I was prepping for this engagement. You can also do typical appear away, be right back, busy, and you can put a status message as well. Age UK. And that way your colleagues can see, right, I know why he's busy as well, so I definitely don't want to bother him at that point in time. Okay, so that's we call that presence. And as mentioned, you can allow other organisations including brand partners in our case, to see each other's presence if we allow that at IT level. Okay. So when we fire up a new chat, what's actually happening is the conversation aspect. As I mentioned, you can do things like app mentions. It's got all the typical things you would expect from social media, GIFs, if you allow them, of course, stickers, schedule meetings directly from the app. When we think about the technical aspects, so the conversations will be stored in Exchange Online. The files, when it's a one-to-one chat, is actually stored on your OneDrive for Business storage. So there's a folder in there called, I believe it's Teams Conversations, and the files are stored in there. Organization, the handy thing about Office 365 is that when you complete the kind of org chart, if you set the right people's managers up for you, it will give you this nice kind of org chart for each user, where you can then drill down into each user and see who they manage, or you can IM those directly or give them a call as well. And activity, there's not much going on here, but often you can then see other chats that you've had, other meetings you've had together, and you can actually jump straight back to those documents you were working at that point as well. Moving down to Teams. So you can see that Colin is a member of a number of teams here. So we have Contoso Scotland Marketing. So that's my demo tenant. You have Mark 8 project team. So he's working on a new product. It's a drone copter. And he also actually volunteers part-time at the Glasgow Contoso Scotland retail store as well. We won't delve in there today. So we'll use research and development. It's a fairly well populated area. So this is where you can see this is all of the Mark 8 project team can actually see everything that's going on within research and development. So if we go back to the top level and manage team, this is where you can actually see who owns the team, so who can actually add new people, delete people, add new tabs, etc. And then who your guests are. So you'll notice, or may notice in here, is that some of these will say the word guest. That's because you can, again, if IT allow, have external people in the tenant, in your team from there. So you can see I've added my own email address, personal email address, email me if you want, if you can remember it. And from there, you can't see presence because I'm not signed into Teams, but this just calls out that this team does have guests. It's always good to be able to quickly see if and when teams do have guests. Back to research and development. So similar, Exchange Online controls the conversations. So I mentioned we can do things like app mentions. You can see that you can pin documents as well, which I'll come to in a second. A nice feature that certainly as part of the full Microsoft stack, what we're trying to do is drive accessibility. So that doesn't just mean you know, the typical catering for disabilities. So we do have things like immersion readers that help people with dyslexia. We do, as part of Windows 10, have things where you can set the color gradients to cater for certain color blindness aspects as well. You can imagine the typical increased font. We've deemed that basic, but what we're also trying to think about is in some cases, or especially in the non-profit sector, we have global teams trying to collaborate as well. So we have the translate functionality built into the likes of the Teams app and also the Office 365 Pro Plus desktop versions, where you can convert text almost instantly. So you can see here, I have no idea what that says. Translate, and it changes the language over. So the great thing is, and again, my naivety of languages, it reminds me that this actually is Greek as well, so it's very handy. But it just means that if there's anyone in the organisation who may not have English as their first language, it gives you a great opportunity to collaborate there. If indeed we want to collaborate further afield as part of Edge UK, maybe we're going to speak with other non-profits around the globe and learn and share our learnings in terms of how to enable older people to improve their lifestyle, you know, meet our mission. I'm sure there's other non-profits there we could maybe start to forge relationships with, and this type of tool can help with that as well. at the top, Planner is one of the apps that's I really like. I use it a lot. It's a very basic way of aligning tasks to your team members. So you can see that in this case we have project team formed. We have Megan Bowen, Colin Clinton, and you can assign new people those tasks as well. So it can be quite a simple way of managers to assign tasks to their staff, and potentially vice versa as well, and set reminders, set dates when you expect those to happen. So definitely worth investigating that a bit further. And so quite often when I speak to organisations that are a bit further on with the Teams roadmap, they say it looks like there's just an awful lot going on in Teams, and that can be true. But what I always highlight is that it's as customizable as you want it to be. So if you don't want to add any add-ons, you just want to use it for that kind of initially for chat, video conferencing, and accessing files, great. But just worth mentioning that there are a whole host of add-ons that can be added to the tabs that would allow you to do things like, certainly on the, as you can imagine, the Office suite, we can pin a specific Excel file to the tab. So if I just go to assets, you can add that. It could be a Word document, it could be anything. And when we're thinking about Teams, we're aware that quite often with non-profits, it splits down the middle into two ways of thinking about your organisation. Quite often you think about your office-based staff, who Microsoft, we refer to that as informational workers. We often treat them with a bit more technical respect, I guess, and that they're expected to be able to pick things up a bit quicker. The area that often gets neglected and that Microsoft are trying to help with is those frontline workers. So it could be, in the Age UK case, those care workers, if they do actually have any digital input to the organisation. I don't know, if I'm being honest, but I know that certain non-profits are starting to see how we can help not just digitally transform the office-based workers, which are, in my opinion, the slightly easier task. The more difficult one is, right, how can we actually bring this to the front line? How can we have people who, they may have small kind of laptops out in the road, they could have tablets, they could have their mobile phone. Could we use something like Teams to make it really easy for them not only to collaborate with their department and team, give them an easy way to access some of their files, and maybe just pin one or two things that are of the utmost importance. So if there is just a Word document that they refer to constantly, you know, it could be rules or guidelines, then we could pin that for them. So as always with this, the technology is the easy bit, in my opinion. The more difficult part is making sure that we bring our employees on the journey with us. So user adoption and change management, it needs to be a high focus if and when we're looking to bring in and make better use of the rest of the Microsoft 365 stack as well. I just realised I kind of skipped over the quite an important part, the Files tab. So this is the SharePoint Online aspect because we're in a team. And as I mentioned, the Office 365 group that gets created, and when you add new members, they automatically get rights to the files within here as well. You can create additional teams if you need to, or you can see these are referred to as channels. So they almost look like sub-teams, and it's in preview just now, but soon you will be able to edit the permissions on a per channel basis as well, so that only people for each channel can access the relevant files there. You can do subfolders, etc. I know that was one of the questions. So from here, you can see any file can get dropped into there. It doesn't need to be a Microsoft file. You can see there's photos, there are Word documents, etc. And I just want to show that, again, confirming that it is built on SharePoint. In the background, you do then get the richness of SharePoint. So some of the benefits of SharePoint that you would get over staying on-prem or some other third-party cloud storage is you have things like you can create workflows so that you can submit documents for approval, and it will automatically email your manager. That's the kind of basic option. You do have things like history and versioning as well. If you click the ellipses, you can see version history, so you can then see who edited the document last, what they changed. You can compare versions as well. So it is as full feature rich. When you drop files into Teams, you do get the same functionality that you get in SharePoint. So it's quite a common ask. I'm just going to minimize that again. From here, it's worth mentioning that Teams is an online only application just now. We are kind of working to change that. But what you can do is, because it has that SharePoint functionality, if you did need to access these files on the go, we can actually make use of the OneDrive sync engine that is built into the likes of Windows 10 or can be installed on Windows 7 by clicking sync. So if I do that, that should hopefully kick in for us. And while we're waiting, I'll maybe just give you a quick fly through of OneDrive as well. So you can see at the bottom right hand corner, the blue clouds is the OneDrive for Business sync engine. Not got the new icon here yet, so soon that's going to change as well, slightly, but it is still blue. I can see it in mine. From there, you can see when you hover over it, it tells you whether it's synchronized and up to date. So in this case, looking at the synchronization for Colin Clinton, this is technically his personal documents. I'm just going to talk you through a few of the icons here, because I think there's been some great improvements with OneDrive for Business in the last kind of year or so that maybe worth just highlighting. So as mentioned, these are files that Colin feels he probably won't be sharing much with other people. That's why he didn't want to add them to the likes of a Teams SharePoint site. From here, you can see certainly the typical stuff, date modified, etc. But I want to bring your attention to the status. So the green tick, the green tick within the white circle means that the file is available offline. So the device has a copy of this on it. The cloud actually means that the files haven't been downloaded. Now, this can be really useful for those cases where you may have terabytes of files for a user, or indeed for a SharePoint online site. Quite often, if you buy a new device these days and it's a SSD hard drive, it will probably only be about 128 to 256 gig. So you don't want to synchronize everything all of the time. So you have the option then to say, what do we need when I'm offline? What can I leave simply in the cloud and pull down when I need it? So for example, cloud file, if you double click, when you're online, of course, it will download in the background and open pretty much as normal. You can see I've not actually put any text in. Would have helped, made the demo a bit smoother, but you get the picture. So you see when you go back out that it does now have the green tick, meaning that it has a local copy downloaded. If and when you wanted to free up hard drive space, so it probably isn't an issue here. If I go to this PC, you can see I've still got plenty of space. But if I wanted to free up some space, I could just select some of those older files, right click, and clear space. And the great thing is it doesn't take them out of that view. So to the end user, they might not even notice that some of these files are cloud-based. The pointing record is still there, so that if and when they need to find it, they still go back to the same place and just double-click the file they need to access, and it will, of course, re-download. Okay. Another icon that's worth pointing out is the share icon. So you can see here that the file has been shared. So as mentioned, although these are personal files, quite often you will still have documents you want to share with other people. One of your questions was, how do we avoid, having 5 copies of the same file, and the answer to that is to start to use SharePoint Online and OneDrive more, because what you can do is, instead of sharing the file as an attachment and someone edits that and then sends it back to you, and then you try to take your copies you made and merge them together, if you use the option to share, like so, or indeed through SharePoint, even with external recipients, you send a link to the file so that they actually edit the same copy as you. And that means that if and when they've done their changes, that will automatically sync to that copy. And again, one single version of the truth, which is exactly what you want. Okay, so you can send links like so. The nice thing is with the Office 365 Pro Plus, so via Outlook, when you try to send an attachment, it will actually prompt the user, do you want to actually share a link instead? So it is an education piece, again, harking back to the fact we need to be on top of our user adoption. But that is the best way to avoid that multi-versions of the same file. So just looking through my notes here. So we've looked at OneDrive. I've mentioned that via the E1 donation and the Business Essentials, each user has a terabyte of space, so in the cloud, and can synchronize if and when they need to. We can, via SharePoint Online, if you're wondering how much storage you get for all of your teams. So we give you 1 terabyte of storage per organization, and then an additional 10 gig per licensed user as well. You can buy storage over and above that if you need to. I've had very few organizations that have actually had to do that. Okay. In terms of getting data into these locations, we do have a number of tools that can help us. So for file shares to SharePoint Online, for example, we have the SharePoint Online migration tool. So it will just start to synchronize files into the cloud, even as they're being edited. For OneDrive, you can make use of that tool. Another option is that a lot of nonprofits have started doing is they're trying to tie it in with their Windows 7 to Windows 10 migration. So they are actually deploying Office 365 Pro Plus, including OneDrive, to Windows 7. They are then synchronizing automatically the user's desktop, their documents and pictures folders. And when the user then comes to get Windows 10, whether that's reinstalling it on the same device or a brand new device, the files will be there with the clouds when they sign in, and they can then just download those as and when they need them. So there's a few ways to tackle the migration, and again, I'm going to point you at a few resources in a second that can hopefully help with that. So that's, like I said, a very brief run through of Teams. Obviously, we're doing the video aspect just now. So I don't know if I do this, it might help. I can see some of you have video enabled. So you're probably aware that there's some of the functionality that's there is video conferencing. I'll maybe turn mine on and see how we go. Hello. So I'm working from the unofficial Microsoft Glasgow office, which is basically a glorified shed in my dad's garden, and I've just remembered this has been recorded, so you're not allowed to send this to anyone. But the idea is that I can work anywhere when I'm using Windows 10 and Office 365 Pro Plus with Teams. So quite often it's from locations such as this. It could be at the airport, train station, you name it. I can do that. From there, you can see we can do things like blur the background as well. That's sometimes quite handy if you're in a public place. Sometimes I'll put my headset on, blur the background, and then that way there's not as many distractions to those that you're having the call with as well.
Just to say that you're already shared at the bottom of my screen. This isn't your main video screen. See what I mean?
Yeah, good point. I was hoping you would just see the wee title. I wasn't going to spend too much on it, but give me a sec. Just make sure everyone's seen that. I don't even think there is a way to see a full preview of yourself because of that. But yeah, in the bottom corner, you should be able to see my face, if you like. If there wasn't sharing content, we would then be able to see the full screen. The nice thing is it splits based on who's talking, so it will transition between whoever is talking at that point in time. Okay, I'm going to, there's like 2 more slides and then I want to get to your questions. I know that we're quite close to time. Okay, so that was, like I said, just a quick overview of some of the tools there. I've just seen one of the questions, how do you create a team? So assuming you have rights, you would typically click the button at the bottom there, join or create a team. As I mentioned, it points out some of the other Office 365 groups you have or can join. You can then create the team. And you have 2 options, assuming IT allow it, is build a team from scratch. So that's where it will create the new Office 365 group, or indeed create from an existing Office 365 group as well. When you click it, you've got 2 options, which is private or public. So private, typically if it's just per department, the department lead or IT would create the group. Demo. And you give it a couple of minutes. And at that point, you can actually then start inviting people as well. So it's not even a few minutes. So Megan, add. And at that point, Megan gets an email saying you've been added as a member to Age UK demo team. Close. And you see straight off the bat, when you create it, it creates a channel called general, excuse me. Conversations are ready to go. Your file store via SharePoint Online is ready to go, and it adds a wiki page as well. And again, the head of that group or team or department or IT indeed could then say, right, what do we want this team to look like for those people, potentially before inviting them as well. So again, user adoption, if you have it all laid out, you could then spend some time taking them through what you've added and how they could use that to try and improve their collaboration and I guess improve their productivity as well. Okay. Right, I'll go back to the slides and I'm going to stop my video just to start that there. Okay. So there's a few resources. I'm going to send an email to Christopher with these links on them directly. So we have a few things that would work for both the business decision makers and the IT pros. There's a bit of a mix in there. So we have things like the tech community. So that's where you can collaborate, share and learn from experts. It's a forum. The docs.microsoft.com website is basically my Bible. Quite often if you're searching, so Binging of course, not Google, you search the word docs and then the Microsoft product you want more information on. That's a wee quick tip for you that I use pretty much every day, multiple times a day. Transform.microsoft.com, that can be helpful for trying to plan your IT strategy. And at Microsoft, we don't like to just say, yeah, here's all of our cool products, go and use them all. For me, you need to start with your business requirements, prioritize those, and then see what solutions, Microsoft or otherwise, could potentially help fulfill those. Okay, support.microsoft.com, yeah, you can, there's FAQs in there, there's additional links to documentation, you can raise tickets via there as well. The productivity library, it's a good one for a couple of key scenarios. So it's in plain English what you're trying to achieve. So that's why having your business scenarios or your key business requirements lined up beforehand can be useful, because then the productivity library can take you through that. The adoption guide, really nice as well. It's some adoption best practices. So it talks about change management, user adoption, how do we help engage the business to adopt our tools via things like early adopters and champions. So definitely worth having a read there. And like I say, the email I'll send over, there's a few over and above that are more non-profit specific, because again, I've made a bit of an assumption that everyone's aware of that Microsoft do offer non-profit discounts, they offer the donated SKUs, but if anyone has any questions about that, I'll put in the links as to how you can confirm your eligibility and start to get access to those as well. Lastly, before we go to FAQ, Fast Track for Microsoft 365 is another great resource. So working with Age UK National just now to try and get onboarded to the service. So there's a couple of kind of levels to it. So all customers, you can log in and you get access to the resource hub. So again, that's more tools and components and email templates and posters for trying to improve that adoption of the products and involvement from the business. For those that have 150 or more paid for seats, so the donated SKUs aren't eligible, unfortunately, but those with that 150 or more can actually then get access to fast track engineers. So this is subject matter experts who can take you through how do we migrate from our file share to SharePoint Online, or from local storage on users' hard drives to OneDrive, for example. So if you have that, definitely make sure that you follow the link I'm going to send to get registered there. Over 500 data migration. They will actually assist with the migration from on-premise to the cloud as well. So I've mentioned the next steps: review the resources, ensure registration, again, made a bit of an assumption, get onboarding and adoption assistance with Fast Track if you're eligible, and consider partner support to accelerate your migration and adoption. I know it's something, Christopher, we touched on. It could be worth finding out what brand partners are using, partners in terms of consultancy partners to utilize Office 365. What has your experiences been? Would it be worthwhile trying to find a partner that could cater for the brand as a whole? Because we can certainly help find non-profit sensitive partners that would help you meet your needs as well. So that's something for you guys to come back to us on. And with that, I'd just like to go over to the Q&A. So Christopher, have you had a look through? Do you want me just to scroll through and try and answer as many? Is there ones you want to pick out, or do you want to go to the mics?
Well, there weren't any. There was only three. We had one was from Danielle, and she's left. That was how to create a group, which you've kind of, sorry, a team, which you've kind of gone through. The only other one was from Beverly, which was, could SharePoint replace a shared drive on our server?
Yes, so absolutely, that's the most common use for SharePoint Online. So there is a migration tool that will take a traditional file share on a server, so a Windows server, or there's a number of other options as well, the likes of Box, which is one of our competitors. We can arrange for the migration through to SharePoint Online. As mentioned, 1 terabyte of storage plus 10 gig for every licensed user. It's free, technically. Any other questions? But you can come to the mic now if you want, just unmute and by all means ask questions.
Sorry, we had some more questions come through. Which Danny's got one, but we're just trying to sort out his microphone. From Dow, will the teams integrate with Kazala? We haven't started US, but he was curious.
Yeah, good question, Dale. There was an announcement fairly recently, I think it was a few weeks ago, that we are looking to integrate these more closely. For those that aren't aware of what Kazala is, it's very much Microsoft's version of WhatsApp. It's where it uses phone numbers as the identity basis, and there was an announcement saying that there's going to be better integration between the two products. Certainly that could be something that for non-profits could be really beneficial for those that have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of volunteers. It could be a great way to engage with those users as well at low or no cost.
Okay, thank you. Danny, are you typing? So we've got Anne Dimmock. How effective is Microsoft 365 for a very small staff team?
Yeah, Anne, would you say that's a small IT team, or is that a small organisation in general, or both? I'll give you a minute to think it. 5 staff in total, small organisation. Yeah, so for example, great example, my brother, he was moaning to me about his corporate email. He is a one-man band, you know, he's a heating engineer, which is handy given I've just moved house. He had problems with his email, continually down, continually getting spam, you know, not working very well. I actually migrated him to Office 365 Business Premium. So he now has all of his files from OneDrive replicated from his desktop and documents across. He now has his email in a secure managed service where he or I, should I say, don't need to worry about that. So certainly that's the beauty of Microsoft 365, is that there's no massive investment up front anymore. You know, in the old days you had to buy the file share server, you know, you had to then install it, you had to configure it. Microsoft will handle that for you. In your case, as I mentioned, for me, I want to recommend that we start to use everything we're already getting donated to us. So for 5, Microsoft Business Office 365 Business Essentials would do the job to get us started. And then what comes next, typically non-profit or otherwise, is right, how do we start to think about other things we can do with the products? So that's where EMS often starts to come into consideration. So that's where we do things like use Intune to manage your Windows 10 devices and iOS and Android devices as well. I touched on the fact information protection. So do we want to classify our documents, be able to revoke access? You can then use tools that can show what other cloud products your users are storing data in. That can be quite interesting as well. So all this is doable. So what I always ask as well at this point is, if and when you're thinking about your IT strategy and you're looking at products, is at least try and be aware of what Microsoft has in that area, because we have built this into what we see as a complete solution in the M365 stack. Just looking at the questions now. You work in documents offline. If you don't have access to internet, lose connection, do you save it to your device when you upload back? Yeah, so the way that it works is, if you're on a Windows device, I showed you the OneDrive sync engine. So in Colin's case, he had the files in his documents folder. Those with the green tick means he had them offline. So if he lost his internet connection, so on a train is a good example, when he's working in his document, the next time that he gets internet connectivity, the OneDrive sync engine will then process that change into the cloud. A question I sometimes get at this point is, and I didn't do a good job of demoing it, is that we can actually have multiple people editing the same document at the same time. It's smart enough that if one person is offline, when they synchronize their changes, it will actually merge the relevant changes on a line-by-line basis as well. If there's any conflicts, i.e. 2 people try to edit the same line at the same time, it would then flag up and ask what one do you want to keep. So yeah, something that, like I say, I glossed over. We ran out of time, but certainly a good option there as well for cross collaboration, and why you want your files stored in OneDrive and SharePoint.
We had one quick one from Danny, which is, would SharePoint be the best replacement for a shared drive, not OneDrive? And you said what the key difference is?
Yes. So in short, OneDrive is for personal and the whole. You can still share from there, but you can. It's not the preferred use. SharePoint is the file share replacement.
One from Dow, which is, we're using groups a lot, but not so much teams. We found that the team has taken us some time to get used to using them, but we've seen the benefits. We've created an intranet, and we've created both team-based groups and project-based groups. That's really more of a comment than a question, but I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that.
Yeah, it's so, like I say, these resources I'm going to share with you, it's about IT first of all, getting comfortable with it. It's then about, from an IT perspective, I think we need to be a wee bit more business savvy going forward. I think that's going to be part of our role in the next kind of 5 years, if not now, is that the technology bit is becoming much easier, but we need to then be able to spot gaps in the business for where we can utilize some of these tools. So I mentioned some of the examples we've seen elsewhere, where there's non-profits who want their care workers to be able to use Teams, because what you could then do is do a video call to show someone something, and whether it's a care home or you know, they just want the chat functionality. So we need to think of those scenarios where we could help improve the business productivity using the solutions available to us.
Okay, and then one quick one, which you probably won't be able to answer, but
Yeah.
it just says, any advice on how to deploy Office 365 to computers on a network and how to set automatic sync with OneDrive? And I think that's probably bigger than you can answer now.
Yeah, in short, there's a number of ways. If you have Intune, you can deploy it using that. If you have SCCM, you can deploy Office 365 using that. You can download an offline toolkit for Office deployment toolkit that will help create a package that you can then push to the devices using the MSI. So there's a number of ways. And lastly, the last piece there, automatic sync with OneDrive, search docs, OneDrive sync, and the other term to use is known folder move. So that will automatically silently sign the user into OneDrive and start to sync desktop documents and pictures.
Okay, so thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
If anyone else has got any other questions, you can email them to me. I think either people can contact you directly, or we can forward your details on. When we send the email out with all those links, we can put your details in there if people want to come to you directly. Is that an option?
Yeah, I would ask if you collate the questions just in case there's about 30 of the same.
Yeah.
That way, to put it in context, I'm the only modern workplace technical specialist in Europe.
Okay.
Serving the non-profit sector just now. So if someone can do the kind of admin side and put the point questions to me, by all means, I can help out.
Okay.
Again, highlighting the fact that I think as an organisation, I know that I've spoken about, we want cross collaboration between the brand partners because you should be able to learn quite a lot from each other. So having forums like this and a bit more open, where we can actually chat amongst ourselves as well would be good. And as I mentioned, it's for us positioning a reputable partner to assist with these migrations could be a good idea as well.
Okay. Anything else?
Just one more question for me. Hi, it's Danny from Project Manager in the IT team. I'm just wondering, it might be more to Christopher and Molly. I just wonder, has there been a survey at all with the brand partners to see how many people are using Office 365, how many people are using Teams?
You can't hear me. Okay. Yeah, so we haven't. I don't know if Molly was doing something with as part of your team's project. I don't know if there was any survey that was done. So it may be something we need to look at to kind of get a kind of idea of who's contacting. I mean, the people that we've contacted generally for this call has been through for the websites and the people running the CMSs. So it might be a wider sort of net to cast to find out actually who's running those systems. But yeah, it's something that we'll need to know going forward. Otherwise, thank you very much, Clint. And yeah, if you forward those details on to me, then I can disseminate them to the partners. And if we've got any more questions, then please email me at partner.content@ageuk.org.uk, and then we can get them answered for you, hopefully. This presentation will be turned into a video and we'll put it on the Digital Hub. So if you missed the first bit, you'll be able to see the whole thing all the way through. And as I said, keep your eye out for any more webinars that we're going to be running. They'll come in your newsletter or they'll be on the loop. Otherwise, thank you very much.